Hello everyone, today I want to talk about how Soros is targeting China, while Trump is now going after Soros. There's an organization called Reporters Without Borders. They see journalists dying in Gaza and don't follow up, but instead, they go and support media bosses in Hong Kong. Some things have developed to a point that's really hard to tolerate. But the people who should really care about these issues seem completely indifferent. On August 24, Israel launched 2 attacks on Nasser Hospital in Khan Younis, southern Gaza. The second strike came just minutes after the first. According to Nasser Hospital, the second attack mainly killed journalists, medical staff, and emergency responders who rushed to the scene, resulting in the deaths of 5 journalists and 4 medical workers. Those killed included freelance journalists for Reuters and the Associated Press, as well as a cameraman from Al Jazeera. Israeli security officials claimed that they saw a camera lens on the hospital roof and concluded that Hamas was using it to monitor Israeli military movements in the area, so they launched the attack immediately. In fact, it is well known that Nasser Hospital is the only relatively intact building in the area. Journalists have long gathered on the hospital's terrace or rooftop to film what's happening in the area. After this tragedy, some organizations that claim to care about journalists, like Reporters Without Borders, made the usual statements, saying that Israel is doing everything it can to suppress independent voices trying to report on the situation in Gaza. However, these statements feel rather perfunctory. Real journalists are truly outraged. Valerie Sink, a freelance reporter for Reuters, had a much more genuine reaction. She anxiously displayed her press credentials and resigned in protest. As for Reporters Without Borders, they seem to be even more invested when it comes to the Jimmy Lai case. On the eve of the retrial of the recent case, Reporters Without Borders, in coordination with overseas political groups supporting Jimmy Lai, issued a statement on August 10, saying that since Jimmy Lai was arrested in December 2022, he has been held in solitary confinement in cell number 5 and is only allowed 50 minutes of activity each day. They also claim that Jimmy Lai has been unable to receive proper specialist medical treatment and is facing serious threats. Jimmy Lai's international legal team had already warned that his weight loss is worrying and that he is becoming increasingly frail, so they are demanding his immediate release. As an organization that claims to support journalists, it's surprising that Reporters Without Borders can ignore the facts and issue such a political statement. For example, the Hong Kong legal team that truly represents Jimmy Lai had already issued a statement clarifying that Jimmy Lai has not appointed any so-called international legal team. This shows that the so-called international legal team is just a fake. So why does Reporters Without Borders still quote the opinions of this fake international legal team? Furthermore, after the Jimmy Lai case resumed, his representing lawyer also confirmed in court that Jimmy Lai is receiving appropriate treatment in prison. What evidence does Reporters Without Borders have to claim that Jimmy Lai is unable to receive proper specialist treatment? Seeing this organization make such political statements only makes people more curious about its true background. Looking into the information, Reporters Without Borders was founded in France in 1985, and its founder and secretary general is a Frenchman named Robert Menard. Reporters Without Borders originally claimed to be independent, insisting that it did not accept funding from any country, and said its huge income only came from selling ideas in books. But in 2005, Menard was finally forced to admit that he had taken money from the US government, and he saw absolutely no problem with it. Afterwards, on the Reporters Without Borders website, they simply admitted to receiving funding from the US, France, and some other Western countries, including the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, the Soros Foundation, and the Center for a Free Cuba. This center is an organization set up by the US to subvert the Cuban regime, and is directly funded by USAID. From then on, Reporters Without Borders' political stance became crystal clear. Its focus on so-called press freedom issues in places like Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Haiti is actually just in line with the US targeting its rival regimes. When it comes to anti-journalist actions by the US and its allies, they simply turn a blind eye, or at most issue some perfunctory statements. Take for example the recent incident where foreign journalists were killed in Gaza. Reporters Without Borders just made a routine statement, nothing like how they were so worked up over the Jimmy Lai case, calling for his rescue. In fact, Jimmy Lai is not a journalist, he's a media owner. During his trial, it was repeatedly revealed that he interfered with the real journalistic freedom of his subordinates. For example, Apple Daily's chief editor Chan Puiman revealed that Jimmy Lai once scolded her for not running enough anti-China news. According to Chan Puiman's testimony, it was really Jimmy Lai who called all the shots at Apple Daily. When asked whether Apple Daily had editorial independence, Chan Puiman laughed and said, "Only when Mr. Lai didn't say anything, then we had it." If Reporters Without Borders really cared about journalists, when the trial exposed the truth about Jimmy Lai interfering with editorial independence, they should have come out to condemn Jimmy Lai and support the reporters and editors at Apple Daily. The Apple Daily incident seems to be a story of a media boss stepping onto the chessboard, exhausting and dragging down the editorial staff. And it's pretty obvious that Reporters Without Borders founder, Menard, is just someone trying to make a living off this. Later on, after having a falling out with other members of Reporters Without Borders, he accepted an invitation from the Qatari government and set up a separate global media freedom center. But then he also had a conflict with the Qatari government, and Qatari media accused him of being someone who just talks big while staying in five-star hotels. And foreign media even drew cartoons mocking Menard as someone who's always trying to grab attention, showing him with a swollen head, sarcastically asking others, "Am I arrogant or what?" In this world full of people just out to make a buck, it seems like all the principles of freedom and democracy have just become tools for them to make money. This kind of thinking, intervening in other countries' politics all over the world, is closely tied to the so-called white liberal mindset that loudly champions democracy and freedom. And organizations like the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, USAID, and even big players like Soros are all cut from the same cloth. But Trump didn't play by those rules. He took an isolationist approach, grabbing what he could globally, but really just wanting to hunker down in the Americas. So as soon as he took office, he axed the NED and cut off USAID. Now he's going after Soros too, because he sees Soros as the main financial backer of the Democratic Party. On August 27th, Trump publicly called out and criticized Soros and his son by name on social media. Trump posted that George Soros and his outstandingly radical leftist son should be charged under the RICO Act for supporting violent protests and various other activities across the United States. "We will no longer let these lunatics tear America apart, and we won't give them a single chance to breathe or any freedom. Soros and his team of lunatics have caused tremendous harm to our country, including his crazy West Coast friends. Watch out, we're keeping an eye on you." After reading Trump's post, the mainland self-media outlet Nutankan interpreted his message like this. First, the Soros father and son actually support violent protests across the United States. Second, this kind of radical father-son duo has caused great harm to America. Third, Trump made it clear that he's about to take action. He's finally taking legal steps. Actually, Trump is not alone in this. In the past, many third-world countries have been furious with Soros, accusing him of using his control over the Open Society foundations and so on to provide hundreds of millions in funding to NGOs around the world, which then engage in all kinds of anti-government activities, even leading to the overthrow of many regimes. The so-called Rose Revolution in Georgia, the so-called Tulip Revolution in Kyrgyzstan, and the so-called Orange Revolution in Ukraine all have the shadow of the Soros Foundation behind them. It was precisely because of Ukraine's color revolution back then, which overthrew the pro-Russian Ukrainian government at the time, that the new Ukrainian government turned completely to the West and even wanted to join NATO. This triggered a strong backlash from Russia, which eventually led to the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, Soros's playbook has come full circle and is being used in the United States to deal with Trump. Naturally, Trump is absolutely furious about this. Soros is a close ally of the Democratic Party. Back in Trump 1.0, he accused Trump of trying to build a mafia state. On the eve of Biden's departure from office, he awarded Soros the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian honor in the United States. Trump saw all this and harbored deep resentment, waiting for a chance to go after Soros. On Soros's side, there was also strong indignation expressed in response to the accusations from the US president. A foundation funded by Soros stated that Trump's threats against our founder and chairman, Mr. Soros, are outrageous. Our mission is to promote human rights, justice, and democratic principles in the United States and around the world. Let's take a look at how Soros uses his so-called human rights, justice, and democratic principles to deal with China. In September 2009, Soros published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal in the United States, saying that as the founder of the Open Society Foundations, he was more interested in defeating China at the moment than in caring about America's national interests. He then went on to accuse BlackRock, the world's largest investment asset management company, of making a tragic mistake by investing huge sums of money in China, and claimed that this would harm the national security interests of the United States and other democratic countries. Soros warned this investment company, which manages over $6.5 trillion in assets, telling it not to go against the US government and not to invest in China. Soros has basically become a spokesperson for the US government at this point. Soros spares no effort in talking down China, and in reality, he just wants to undermine China's development and serve America's efforts to suppress China. Previously, he also suggested that the US government crack down on China's high-tech industries. Because of this financial killer who has always supported the Democratic Party and once loudly called Trump a liar and a potential dictator, even unusually praised Trump when the Trump administration 1.0 took action to suppress China. However, by the time of the 2024 US election, he once again became a die-hard supporter of the Democratic Party. At the end of the day, he and the Democratic Party really are two of a kind. In fact, Soros is just a financial tycoon, but he prefers people to call him a borderless statesman. Back when Soros was manipulating finance and targeting different countries everywhere, he already started to develop the idea of building an open society. In his view, in a closed society, capital is hard to penetrate, and there are very few opportunities for speculation. Only an open society allows these speculators to easily amass huge fortunes. So how can an open society be built? Soros's approach is to promote Western democratic systems through color revolutions, because only under the Western democratic model will there be a more open market economy, where capital can dominate everything. If every country adopts Western democracy, it becomes Soros's ticket to manipulate the finances of other countries. At the end of the day, it's all about money. Now that Soros has offended Trump, let's see how Trump deals with him. It's like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Let's just sit back and enjoy the show.